On his birthday, I thought I'd hear words of love, but instead, he called me just to insult me. That moment broke me, but it also lit a fire inside me. What started as betrayal turned into the sweetest revenge. Let me tell you my story. I still remember that night as if it just happened yesterday. The clock had just struck 11:58 p.m. I was sitting in my room, nervously waiting. My heart was racing, my palms were sweaty, and I couldn't stop looking at my phone screen. It was his birthday, his special day. And for me, it wasn't just another birthday. It was the day I wanted to remind him how much he meant to me. You know, some people think birthdays are just numbers, just another year passing by. But for me, birthdays were sacred. They were proof that someone existed in this world, proof that their life had value, proof that they were loved. And when you're in love, nothing feels more beautiful than celebrating the existence of the person who owns your heart. So I had planned everything. The surprise, the little cake I had baked with my own hands, burned the first one, by the way, and had to start all over again. The gift I wrapped even though I had only a few coins left after paying my bills. It wasn't expensive, no. It wasn't glamorous or shiny, but it came from the deepest corners of my heart. I wanted to call him exactly at midnight. I wanted to be the first voice he heard as he stepped into his new year of life. I wanted him to feel loved, wanted, cherished. And so, as the digital clock on my phone blinked 12 a.m., I pressed the call button. My heart skipped a beat as the line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then he picked up. I smiled instantly, whispering softly, "Happy birthday, love." But what came after those words? I was not prepared for it. I was not ready. His voice, instead of sounding warm or joyful, came out cold, almost irritated, almost cruel. "Do you really think you're good enough for me?" he said. I froze. At first, I thought I heard wrong. Maybe the line cracked. Maybe he was joking. "What?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, waiting for him to laugh and say, "Just kidding, babe." But no, his voice turned sharper, more venomous. "Don't embarrass me with your cheap gestures, okay? On my birthday of all days, don't act desperate." My hand went numb. The phone suddenly felt heavier than ever. My heart started pounding so loud, I thought he could hear it through the call. I tried to speak, but the words got stuck in my throat. My lips quivered as if they were betraying me. I wanted to scream, "What are you saying? I stayed up all night just for you." But instead, all I managed was silence. Do you know that feeling when your entire world flips upside down in just a few seconds? That's what happened to me. I had built a whole picture of love in my head. I had painted him as my prince, my safe place, my forever. But in that single moment with those cruel words, the picture cracked, the frame shattered, and all that remained was a hollow silence that burned deeper than any fire. He didn't even wait for me to respond. He ended the call, just like that. One second, I was whispering a gentle happy birthday, and the next second, I was staring at a blank phone screen with tears already clouding my eyes. I dropped the phone on my bed and buried my face in my hands. And that's when it hit me, the reality. The person I loved the most had just insulted me on the day I wanted to make special for him. I cried. Oh, I cried that night, like a child who had lost everything. My pillow soaked in tears, my chest heavy with unspoken words. I kept replaying the moment in my head over and over again, asking myself why? Why would he say that? Why would he hurt me like this? What had I done to deserve it? But no matter how much I searched for answers, all I found was pain. That night, I cried myself to sleep. But I didn't know then that this was just the beginning of a journey filled with love, betrayal, deceit, and eventually, revenge. When I look back now, I realize something painful. The signs were always there. They weren't hidden. They weren't complicated puzzles waiting to be solved. They were right in front of me, waving red flags as if to scream, "Wake up! This isn't love. This is a trap." But I didn't listen. I didn't want to listen. Because when you're in love, you don't see reality for what it is. You see the version of reality you want to believe in. The first day I met him, it wasn't magical in the way movies make it look. There weren't fireworks or violins in the background, but there was something about him, something that drew me in instantly. The way he carried himself, the way his smile seemed effortless, the way his eyes seemed to hold secrets but still looked at me like I was the only person in the room. At that time, I was vulnerable. My life wasn't perfect. I was struggling financially, emotionally, and mentally. I needed something to hold on to, something to believe in. And then, here came this man who made me feel seen, who made me feel like I mattered. And that's how it started. He didn't sweep me off my feet with grand gestures. He didn't need to. Sometimes it doesn't take much to fall in love. Sometimes all it takes is someone giving you just enough to make you think you're special. That's what he did, or at least that's what I thought he did. He was charming, almost too charming. He knew exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. His compliments were perfectly timed. His messages always seemed to arrive when I was doubting myself. His calls always came when I felt lonely. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started building an entire illusion around him. I thought to myself, this is it. This is the man I've been waiting for, the one who will protect me, cherish me, and love me unconditionally. I convinced myself that fate had brought us together, that this connection was something rare and precious. But charm is dangerous. Real love is steady, patient, consistent. But charm is like smoke. It dazzles you for a moment, fills your eyes with wonder, but then it disappears, leaving you choking on the emptiness it was hiding. My friends never liked him. They never came right out and said it, but I could tell by their voices when I talked about him. The raised eyebrows, the side glances, the subtle questions like, "Are you sure he's the one?" I brushed them off every time. I told myself, they don't understand us. They don't see what I see. I thought maybe they were jealous. Maybe they just couldn't stand to see me happy. Even when he disappeared for hours without answering my calls, I told myself he was busy. When he canceled our plans at the last minute, I told myself he had important work. When I caught him texting someone and tilting his screen away from me, I told myself I was being paranoid. Every single time I built an excuse for him. One excuse after another, like bricks in a wall that separated me from the truth. And yet, the smallest things he did still felt enormous to me. I remember how my entire day would brighten when he said, "I miss you." I remember the way my heart would swell when he held my hand in public. I remember thinking I was the luckiest girl in the world when he looked at me and laughed at something I said. Those small gestures, those tiny crumbs of affection, were enough to keep me hooked. But love isn't supposed to be about crumbs. It isn't supposed to be about occasional words or gestures. Love is supposed to be about respect, about consistency, about safety. And those were the things missing from our relationship. Things I didn't even notice because I was so blinded by the illusion I had created in my head. I was living in a story I'd written myself. In my mind, I was the girl in the fairy tale, and he was my prince. I told myself that love conquers all, that if I loved him enough, he would eventually love me back in the same way. But I was wrong, so wrong. At first, I didn't see the shift because it was so subtle. The calls got shorter. The texts came less often. The tone of his voice grew colder. When I asked if something was wrong, he brushed it off. I told myself, no, every couple goes through phases. This is just one of those phases. But deep down, I knew. My heart knew. This wasn't a phase. It was the beginning of the end. And yet, I held on. I clung to the illusion because I was terrified of letting it go. I was terrified of being alone. The truth is, sometimes the fear of being alone is stronger than the reality of being unloved. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't love that blinded me. I blinded myself. I put on rose-colored glasses and called it destiny. I painted over red flags and called it loyalty. I ignored my gut feelings and called it trust. I built an illusion so strong that when it finally shattered, on his birthday with those cruel words, it didn't just break me. It destroyed everything I thought I knew about love. But in a strange way, that illusion was necessary. Because without it, I would never have seen the truth about him. And without the truth, I would never have found the strength to rise again. The morning after that phone call, I woke up with swollen eyes and a heavy heart. My pillow was still damp with tears, and for a long while I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, wondering how a single night could change so much. His words kept replaying in my mind, like a cruel echo I couldn't escape. Don't embarrass me with your cheap gestures. Part of me wanted to give up. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe the relationship had reached its breaking point, and maybe I needed to accept that. But another part of me, the part still clinging to the illusion of who I thought he was, whispered, maybe he was just stressed. Maybe he didn't mean it. That voice was dangerous, but it was comforting. And in that moment, I wanted comfort more than truth. So instead of walking away, I decided to try harder. I told myself that if I showed up for him, if I made an effort, he would see how much I loved him. He would realize how much I cared. He would remember the woman who stood by his side when no one else did. That's why, despite everything, I went to his birthday party. I spent the day preparing. I baked another cake. This one perfect. No burns, no mistakes. I wrapped the gift I had saved up for even though it wasn't expensive. I put on the nicest dress I owned, did my hair, and tried to hide the sadness on my face with a little makeup. I wanted to look beautiful for him. I wanted him to look at me and remember why he fell in love with me in the first place. When I finally walked into the party, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The place was buzzing with people. Friends, coworkers, faces I didn't recognize. Laughter filled the room. Music pulsed in the background. And for a moment I thought, this is it. This is my chance to make things right. I spotted him across the room, surrounded by people. He was smiling, laughing, looking every bit like the charming man I had fallen for. My heart softened at the sight, and for a second I thought maybe last night had been a bad dream. Maybe he would see me now, walk over and pull me into his arms. But what happened instead still haunts me to this day. I walked up to him, holding the cake and the gift in my hands. When he noticed me, his smile didn't widen. It faltered, just for a second. And in that second, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Disappointment. As if I was the last person he wanted to see there. Still, I forced a smile and said softly, "Happy birthday." He looked at me, then looked at the people around him. And instead of introducing me as his girlfriend, instead of proudly holding my hand and showing me off, he simply said, "This is someone who insists on being close to me." The room went silent for me. My ears rang, my stomach dropped, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Someone who insists on being close to me. That's all I was to him in front of his friends. Not his girlfriend, not his partner, not the woman who stayed up all night baking him cakes and saving money for his gifts. Just someone. The humiliation burned through me. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. People glanced at me with awkward smiles, some whispering, some smirking. I could feel their judgment, their pity, their curiosity. And he just laughed it off and moved on, as if I wasn't even standing there with my heart in pieces. I set the cake down quietly on the table, placed the gift beside it, and excused myself to the corner of the room. I stood there, watching him laugh with others, his arm casually draped around someone else's shoulder, as if I didn't exist. Every second felt like an eternity. I wanted to leave. God, I wanted to run out of there. But a part of me was frozen. Frozen in disbelief. Frozen in heartbreak. Frozen in the realization that the man I thought loved me had just publicly humiliated me without a second thought. At one point, he glanced at me from across the room. Our eyes met for a brief second, and I expected to see regret, or maybe guilt. But there was nothing. Just indifference. As if I was a stranger who had stumbled into the wrong party. That moment broke something inside me. Something that no amount of apologies or sweet words could ever fix again. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped out quietly without saying goodbye. I walked down the street with tears streaming down my face, the cold night air stinging my skin. I clutched my empty hands, realizing I had given him everything I had to give. And still, it wasn't enough. Worse, it was unwanted. That night, as I lay in bed replaying everything in my head, a new feeling began to grow inside me. Not love, not sadness, not even anger, but something darker, something sharper. The seed of revenge had been planted, because I realized then that he didn't just hurt me, he humiliated me. He stripped away my dignity in front of others, and he did it without hesitation. And for that, I knew, one day, he would regret it. After that night, something inside me shifted. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The humiliation, the way he looked at me, the way he dismissed me as if I was nothing, it all played in my mind like a broken record. I told myself I should walk away, that no amount of love was worth this kind of pain. But love, or what I thought was love, is a stubborn thing. It clings to you even when it's tearing you apart. For days, I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking. Maybe he was drunk at the party. Maybe he didn't mean to say what he did. Maybe he was just caught up in the moment and didn't realize how it hurt me. I wanted so badly to believe there was a reasonable explanation because the alternative, that he simply didn't care, was too painful to accept. But then the excuses started to run out. He grew colder with every passing day. His calls became shorter, his texts less frequent, his presence more distant. It was like I was chasing a shadow, always reaching but never touching. And the more I chased, the further he pulled away. One night, I decided to surprise him. I thought maybe if I showed up at his place with dinner, we could talk, maybe laugh, maybe remember what we used to have. I stood outside his door, clutching the bag of food I'd prepared, my heart beating nervously. I knocked, waiting for him to open, waiting for that smile I missed so much. But instead of him, it was her, a girl I had never seen before. She looked at me with surprise, then suspicion, standing there in his shirt, her hair tousled like she had just rolled out of his bed. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world stopped. My hands went cold, and I almost dropped the bag I was holding. I forced a smile, though my lips trembled, and asked, "Is he here?" She hesitated, then stepped aside, and there he was, standing behind her, looking at me with eyes that didn't even flinch. No guilt, no shock, no apology. Just annoyance, as if I was the one who had crossed the line. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice flat. I stared at him, my throat tightening. I brought dinner. He sighed, rubbing his forehead like I was a burden. "You shouldn't have come." And in that moment, I knew. I didn't need him to explain. I didn't need to ask questions. The truth was standing right in front of me in the shape of another woman wearing his shirt. I left that night without saying another word. I walked away, my legs shaking, my chest burning, my tears blinding my vision. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the first time. And I was right, because the more I started paying attention, the more I uncovered. Late night calls, messages hidden under fake names, lies that didn't add up. And then, the final blow, discovering that it wasn't just her. There was another one too. 2 women, 2 betrayals, 2 knives in my back. The man I loved, the man I gave my heart to, the man I defended when everyone warned me about him. He was cheating on me, not once, not twice, but constantly, like it was second nature to him. The pain was unbearable. It wasn't just about the cheating. It was about everything I had sacrificed for him. Every time I had chosen him over myself. Every time I ignored my instincts, ignored my friends, ignored the truth staring me in the face. I'd put him on a pedestal, and he had kicked me down from it without a second thought. I broke down, completely. Nights were filled with sobs I couldn't control. Days felt empty, like I was walking through fog. I stopped eating, stopped smiling, stopped living. The betrayal consumed me, chewed me up, and spit me out in pieces. But amidst the pain, there was something else growing inside me. Something stronger than the heartbreak. Something sharper than the tears. Anger. It started as a whisper, a small spark deep in my chest. But with every memory of his lies, with every replay of his cruel words, that spark grew into a flame. A flame that told me I would not let him win, that I would not let him walk away unscathed, because betrayal cuts deep. But sometimes it awakens a part of you that you never knew existed. And for me, that was the moment the idea of revenge was born. After discovering the truth, my world collapsed. It wasn't gradual, it wasn't slow. It came crashing down all at once, like a building whose foundation had been eaten away for years, finally falling into rubble. I thought I was prepared for heartbreak. I thought I was strong enough to handle pain. But nothing could have prepared me for the kind of emptiness his betrayal left behind. The first few days I was a ghost. I moved through life mechanically, like a machine whose wires had been cut but was still trying to function. I woke up, I went to work, I came home, and I cried, over and over again. My phone sat on my nightstand like a haunting reminder, lighting up with his messages that I couldn't bring myself to open. Messages that probably weren't apologies, because I knew him well enough by then to know that guilt was not something he carried. Food lost its taste, music lost its meaning, even colors seemed duller. I remember sitting on the floor of my bedroom, staring at the walls, wondering how everything could feel so heavy when technically nothing had changed except the truth. But that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart, it shatters your sense of reality. It makes you question everything, even the moments you once held sacred. I kept replaying memories in my head, the way he held my hand, the way he said, "I love you," the way he looked into my eyes like I was his everything. Were those moments lies too? Were they just performances? Did he ever mean any of it? Or was I simply a placeholder, someone to keep his bed warm until he found someone better? The questions ate away at me night after night. I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed of him, of us, of laughter that no longer belonged to me, and every time I woke up, it was like losing him all over again. My body started to give in too. I lost weight without trying. My cheeks hollowed. My clothes hung loose. Friends noticed, of course. They asked what was wrong, they tried to comfort me, but I pushed them away. How could I explain the kind of pain I was in? How could I put into words the feeling of being gutted from the inside out? One night, I sat on the bathroom floor, clutching my knees to my chest, sobbing until my throat was raw. I remember looking at myself in the mirror, my eyes red and swollen, my face pale, and I didn't even recognize the person staring back. She wasn't me. She was someone broken, someone lost, someone unworthy. That's what his betrayal had done. It convinced me that I wasn't enough. But then, in the middle of all that darkness, something inside me snapped. Not in a violent way, not in an explosive way, but in a quiet, steady way. It was like my heart whispered, "No more." I realized that I'd given him everything, my time, my love, my energy, my trust, and he had taken it all and thrown it back in my face. And here I was, wasting away, while he was probably out laughing, drinking, living his life without a care in the world. The thought made my stomach twist. The unfairness of it burned in my chest. Why should I be the one to suffer while he carried on untouched? Why should I be the one drowning in tears while he floated through life as if I didn't exist? Why should I let his betrayal define me when he didn't even deserve my love in the first place? That's when the anger started to grow. Slow at first, like a fire flickering in the distance. But the more I thought about him, the more I remembered the lies, the more I replayed the humiliation of that birthday party, the more the fire spread. Anger has a strange way of healing, if you let it. It doesn't erase the pain, but it gives it a purpose. And that's what began to happen with me. My tears dried little by little, replaced by something stronger, something sharper. I wasn't going to let him destroy me. Number, if he thought I would crumble, if he thought I would fade into the background while he kept living his life, he was wrong. So yes, I broke down. Completely. I fell to the lowest point of my life. But from that low point, a new version of me was born. One that wasn't going to beg for love. One that wasn't going to accept humiliation. One that wasn't going to suffer in silence. And one day when the time was right, I promised myself he would see it. He would see the woman he lost. He would see the power he underestimated. And he would regret every single tear he made me cry. When I finally pulled myself out of that pit of despair, it wasn't because the pain had gone away. It wasn't because I had suddenly healed or forgotten. No, the pain was still there, sharp as ever, gnawing at me every day. But somewhere between the tears and the sleepless nights, I realized something. If I kept living this way, he would win. He would have broken me completely, and I refused to give him that satisfaction. I didn't know what my future would look like yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay in that broken state forever. I had to rise. I had to become stronger, not just for me, but for the version of me he had tried to destroy. So I made a decision. Revenge. But not the kind of revenge people think about when they hear the word. I wasn't going to scream at him, expose him, or ruin his life. That would have been too easy for him. No, my revenge would be silent, patient, and far more powerful. I decided that my revenge would be my transformation. Every tear I had shed, every insult I had endured, every betrayal I had suffered, I would turn it into fuel. Fuel to rebuild myself. Fuel to rise so high that he would be forced to watch from the shadows, knowing he could never touch me again. It started small. The first step was simply getting out of bed without crying. That was harder than it sounds, but every morning I forced myself up, even when my body wanted to collapse back into the sheets. Then I started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto paper instead of letting them fester in my head. Writing down the pain made it feel less heavy. And slowly, the words turned from sorrow into determination. I began taking care of myself again. Not for him, not to win him back, but for me. I joined a gym. The first few days, my body ached and my mind screamed to quit, but I kept pushing. Each drop of sweat felt like a drop of weakness leaving my body. I started eating healthier, not skipping meals like I did when I was drowning in grief. And little by little, I saw the changes. My body grew stronger, my posture straighter, my eyes brighter. Next came my career. I threw myself into my work with a kind of focus I'd never known before. Late nights at the office didn't feel draining. They felt empowering. Every achievement, every recognition, every success was another brick in the new foundation I was building for myself. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't defined by him. I was defined by me. I also changed my style. Not dramatically, but enough to feel like I was shedding the old me, the one who had begged for his love. I bought clothes that made me feel confident, experimented with makeup that highlighted my features, and carried myself differently. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the broken girl on the bathroom floor anymore. I saw a woman in the making. Of course, it wasn't easy. Healing never is. There were nights I still cried. Mornings I still doubted myself, moments when the anger came rushing back. But instead of letting those feelings drown me, I used them. I used the hurt as a reminder of why I couldn't go back. I used the anger as fuel to keep moving forward. And the more I changed, the more I realized something important. I didn't need him. I never did. The love I had been begging from him, the validation I'd been chasing, I was capable of giving it to myself all along. That realization was powerful. It was liberating. And it became the heart of my plan. Because my revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about building myself. It was about becoming someone so strong, so radiant, so untouchable that he would have no choice but to regret everything he had done. So I kept going. Day by day, step by step. Transformation doesn't happen overnight, but slowly, I could feel it happening. The girl who once cried herself to sleep was gone. In her place, a woman was emerging, one who was no longer desperate for his love, but determined to rise above his betrayal. And deep down, I knew the day would come when he would see it. The day would come when our paths would cross again, and he would be forced to face the very thing he had tried to destroy. And when that day came, I would be ready. It had been months since I last saw him. Months of silence, of rebuilding, of turning every piece of my pain into strength. By then, I had changed so much that even I barely recognized myself. My body was stronger, my smile was brighter, and my confidence no longer came from anyone else. It came from within me. I wasn't looking for him. In fact, I had promised myself that I didn't need to. But fate has a way of testing you, of putting the very thing you've prepared for right in front of you just to see if you're truly ready. And it happened on an ordinary evening. I was out with friends, dressed in an outfit that made me feel unstoppable, laughing in a way I hadn't laughed in years. For the first time, the weight of the past felt lighter, almost gone. And that's when I saw him. He walked in, just as confident as ever, surrounded by people, his usual charm painted on his face. But something was different this time. The moment his eyes found me, the charm faltered. For a split second, he froze. He looked at me as if he wasn't sure it was really me, and in that moment, I realized the truth. He hadn't expected me to rise. He thought I'd stay broken forever. He thought I'd be the girl crying on the bathroom floor for the rest of my life. But the woman standing in front of him was someone he had never met before. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I held his gaze, calm and steady, and then I smiled. Not the desperate, hopeful smile I used to give him, but a smile of strength. A smile that said, "You don't control me anymore." He approached me eventually, slowly, like he was walking on uncertain ground. "Hey," he said, his voice lower than usual, almost cautious. "Hi," I replied, my tone even, controlled. He tried to make small talk, asking about my life, my work, pretending as if nothing had happened, as if the betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak had been erased from history. But what struck me the most was how unsettled he seemed. For once, I wasn't the one fumbling for words, seeking approval, waiting for scraps of affection. He was. And that's when it hit me. This was my revenge. Not screaming, not exposing him, not humiliating him the way he had humiliated me. My revenge was standing there, unbothered, radiant, stronger than ever, and watching him realize what he had lost. The longer we talked, the clearer it became. He wanted me back. He didn't say it outright, but I saw it in his eyes, in the way he leaned closer, in the way his smile lingered just a little too long. He thought he could charm me again, pull me back into his orbit, make me his safety net once more. But what he didn't understand was that the girl who had loved him blindly was gone. I wasn't his anymore. I was mine. So when he finally said, "Maybe we should catch up sometime, just the two of us," I didn't hesitate. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "No, I don't think that's a good idea." The shock on his face was almost satisfying enough to erase the months of pain. Almost. He tried to cover it with a laugh, brushing it off like it didn't matter. But I saw it. I saw the flicker of regret, the spark of realization that he no longer had control, that he had lost the one thing he thought would always be there. And as I walked away that night, surrounded by people who truly valued me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Because I finally understood that revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about freeing myself. It was about showing him and myself that I was stronger than the heartbreak, stronger than the betrayal, stronger than everything he had tried to break in me. And as far as I was concerned, that was the sweetest revenge of all. After that first confrontation, something inside me shifted completely. I had faced him. I had looked into the eyes of the man who had broken me, and instead of crumbling, I stood tall. That moment wasn't just closure. It was confirmation that I had truly risen above him. But life has a funny way of rewarding you once you let go of the things that weigh you down. Because not long after that night, everything in my life began to align. Work, for one, took off like never before. The focus I had poured into my career began to bear fruit. Projects that once intimidated me became opportunities I thrived in. People noticed. I got promotions, recognition, invitations to events I once only dreamed of attending. And each time I walked into a room, I carried myself differently. Not with arrogance, but with a confidence so natural that it turned heads without me even trying. My social life blossomed too. The friends I had once pushed away during my heartbreak returned, and this time I valued them more deeply than ever. Nights of laughter, road trips, new experiences. I filled my life with memories that had nothing to do with him. I learned to live fully again, not waiting for someone to validate me, but validating myself. And somewhere along the way, people began to notice me in ways they hadn't before. Compliments came often, not just about my appearance, but about my energy, my drive, my presence. It was like I was glowing, and I knew exactly why. Because for the first time, I wasn't dimming my light to keep someone else comfortable. Of course, he noticed too. I'd see him sometimes, whether in person or online. He started liking my posts again, little breadcrumbs of attention as if that would be enough to lure me back. He'd send casual messages, always pretending to check in. But I knew what it was. Regret. Regret dressed up as curiosity, and oh, how sweet it was. Not because I wanted him back, not because I cared about his attention anymore, but because I knew he was watching me rise, and there was nothing he could do about it. He had front row seats to the very transformation his betrayal had ignited. There was one night I'll never forget. I was at a gala for work, dressed in an elegant gown, surrounded by people who admired me not for who I was with, but for who I was. And then, across the room, I saw him. He wasn't the center of attention like he used to be. In fact, he looked smaller, quieter, as if life had humbled him in ways I didn't need to know about. Our eyes met briefly, and for a moment I saw it clearly, the realization in his face, the regret. He had traded me for empty flings, for lies, for nothing of substance. And here I was, thriving, untouchable, radiant in a room he didn't belong to anymore. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. My presence was enough. That was the revenge. Because revenge doesn't always need words. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's the way you walk past without hesitation, without anger, without the slightest desire to ever look back. And as my life continued to rise, his attempts to return grew weaker. He'd text, then delete. He'd comment, then stop. Until one day the attempt ceased altogether. Because even he had realized that I was no longer his story. I had become my own story. A story of betrayal, yes, but also of rebirth. A story of heartbreak, yes, but more importantly, of healing. A story that proved sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone else. It's creating a life so beautiful that their memory doesn't even matter anymore. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. For the longest time, I believed love was something I had to beg for, something I had to earn, to prove myself worthy of, even if it meant shrinking into a version of myself I didn't recognize. But after everything I went through, after the betrayal, the pain, the rebuilding, I understood something profound. Real love doesn't chain you, it frees you. And maybe that's why, when love came back into my life, it didn't arrive the way I expected. It wasn't loud, dramatic, or overwhelming. It wasn't wrapped in chaos or drenched in games. It came quietly, gently, like sunlight breaking through after a long storm. I met him at a time when I wasn't searching. My life was already full. I had my work, my friends, my passions. I had myself. And that was exactly why I was ready. Because I wasn't waiting for someone to save me anymore. I had already saved myself. He wasn't like the man before. He didn't confuse cruelty with confidence or manipulation with love. He didn't make me feel small so he could feel bigger. Instead, he saw me, truly saw me, for who I was, and he celebrated it. Our connection grew slowly, built on conversations that stretched into the night, on laughter that came easily, on silence that never felt uncomfortable. For the first time, I wasn't anxious. I wasn't second-guessing. I wasn't begging for affection. With him, love felt safe. And in that safety, it blossomed. At first, I was cautious. My scars hadn't vanished. They were still there, reminders of where I'd been. But instead of running from them, he honored them. He didn't try to erase my past. He simply showed me that my past didn't define my worth. And the more time I spent with him, the more I realized something. Love, real love, isn't supposed to hurt. It isn't supposed to make you question your value. It isn't supposed to drain you until you're empty. Real love fills you gently, steadily, until you're overflowing. There was one night I'll never forget. We were walking along the waterfront, the air cool, the city lights reflecting on the water. I remember looking at him and realizing I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of being hurt because I knew, even if this love ended, I would never lose myself again. I had learned too much, grown too much, and in that moment I felt something I never thought I would again. Peace. The kind of peace that comes when you know you've finally closed the door on the past and opened your heart, not out of desperation, but out of choice. It wasn't about replacing my old love. It wasn't about proving anything to my ex. It wasn't even about revenge anymore. It was about me. Choosing love, but this time, choosing it from a place of strength instead of weakness. And as I held his hand, feeling the warmth and steadiness of it, I realized something that made me smile. The most beautiful part of my story wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the revenge. It was the rebirth. It was learning that even after the deepest heartbreak, love, real love, was still possible. But only after I'd first learned to love myself. When I look back now, it almost feels like I'm remembering someone else's life. The girl who once cried herself to sleep, who begged for love from someone who only gave her pain. It's hard to believe that was me. But it was. And I don't regret it. Not anymore. Because every tear, every insult, every night I thought I wouldn't make it. Those moments shaped me. They broke me, yes, but they also rebuilt me. They forced me to find a strength I didn't know I had. My story began with betrayal. On his birthday of all days, he chose to insult me, to tear me down, to remind me of my supposed worthlessness. But what he didn't know was that moment would be the spark, the fire that would ignite my transformation. I went through the heartbreak, the loneliness, the anger. I drowned in it for a while, thinking I'd never resurface. But eventually I did. I stood up piece by piece and built myself again, stronger, wiser, untouchable. And when the time came, when fate brought him back into my path, I realized something extraordinary. Revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about creating a life so beautiful, so full, that the person who broke you can no longer reach you. That's the sweetest revenge. Living, thriving, glowing. But my story didn't end with revenge. Because life isn't about staying stuck in pain, no matter how much it wants to find you. Life is about moving forward, about opening your heart again even when it's terrifying, about choosing love, but this time, choosing it from a place of strength. That's what I did. I learned to love again. Not recklessly, not blindly, but with wisdom, with boundaries, with a heart that knew its own worth. And in that love, I found peace. Not because someone completed me, but because I was already whole. And love became an addition, not a requirement. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. You will be hurt. You will be betrayed. You will cry until you think there's nothing left inside you. But those moments are not the end of your story. They are the beginning. The breaking is where the rebuilding starts. Do not let the person who betrayed you define your worth. Do not let their lies become your truth. Stand up. Take the pain and let it mold you into someone stronger, someone brighter, someone freer than you ever imagined. And when the time comes and you face them again, or maybe you don't, you'll know the truth. You didn't just survive. You rose. And that, my friend, is the most powerful revenge of all. Because at the end of the day, this story isn't about him. It was never about him. It's about me. It's about you. It's about every single one of us who has ever been broken and chose to rise anyway.